There are stories that leave a heavy feeling inside you, the kind that sticks to your ribs long after you finish listening. Stories that don't just inform you, they change you a little. And today's story is exactly one of those. It's not about ghosts or serial killers hiding in the shadows or some horror movie fantasy. No, this one is real. It's about how cruelty grows quietly when no one steps in, how evil becomes normal when people look away. It's the story of Sylvia Likens, a 16-year-old girl who ended up in the wrong house at the wrong time, surrounded by the wrong people, and no one stepped in to save her. Sylvia grew up in a poor, unstable family. Her parents worked carnival jobs, constantly moving from town to town. She had several siblings, including her younger sister Jenny, who was her closest friend in the world. Jenny had survived polio and walked with difficulty, and Sylvia was always there, holding her hand, helping her, protecting her without being asked. That's just the kind of person she was. Gentle, responsible, the kind of kid who puts others first. But life didn't give Sylvia many breaks. In 1965, her mother went to jail for a minor theft, and her father left for a long work trip. The girls needed a place to stay. That's how they ended up in the home of Gertrude Badisevsky, a woman with 7 kids of her own, barely any money, and a life that had already chewed her up emotionally and spit her out. The house was filthy, chaotic, almost falling apart. But for the first few days, things were calm. Sylvia and Jenny went to school, ate meals with the family, watched TV, and probably thought they could get through these couple of months. Then one week, Sylvia's father didn't send the payment on time, and everything collapsed. Gertrude snapped. She screamed, she cursed, she blamed the girls for everything, her stress, her poverty, her anger at the world. It was like she'd been waiting for an excuse. And from that moment on, Sylvia became the target of all the frustration and bitterness Gertrude had been carrying for years. What started as yelling turned into slapping. Slapping turned into beating. Beating turned into daily, constant violence. It didn't matter what Sylvia did or didn't do. Gertrude found a reason. And her kids watched. Kids learn fast, especially when the lesson is hurting someone weaker than you is allowed. Soon, the whole house joined in. The cruelty became a routine, a game. Sylvia was an easy target, older than most of the kids, prettier, quieter, more responsible. Everything about her seemed to irritate Gertrude. She started calling Sylvia dirty, a slut, pregnant, shameful. And the terrible thing is, Sylvia started believing it. When an adult breaks you down day after day, even the strongest kid begins to doubt themselves. Neighborhood kids came over all the time. Gertrude's house was the kind of place where children could come and go, make noise, break things, no rules, no supervision. And soon these kids were encouraged to join in the abuse. They hit Sylvia, they mocked her, they treated her suffering like entertainment. In their minds, this wasn't a crime. It was just something that happened in that house. Several neighbors noticed. They heard screams, they saw bruises, they sensed something was wrong. But no one stepped in. Maybe they didn't want trouble. Maybe they convinced themselves it wasn't their business. Maybe it was easier to pretend everything was fine. Meanwhile, Sylvia kept trying to protect her younger sister. Even when she saw their older sister Diana on the street, Sylvia refused to speak up. She murmured, "If I talk to you, I'll get in trouble." Imagine being that scared and still thinking first about someone else's safety. The violence escalated. Gertrude burned her, beat her, starved her, forced her to do humiliating things. The kids followed her lead like it was a game. When you're surrounded by cruelty long enough, cruelty starts to look normal. And then came one of the darkest moments. Gertrude decided she wanted to mark Sylvia. Brand her, literally. She heated a piece of metal and pressed it to Sylvia's stomach, slowly burning words into her skin. When she got tired, she forced her young daughters to finish the job. The children laughed. They clapped. To them, it was an event. After that, Sylvia was locked in the basement. Cold, dark, damp. She could barely walk, barely speak. She was starving, dehydrated, fading away day by day. No one helped her. No one even tried. A few days before she died, Sylvia attempted to escape. She heard Gertrude talking about taking her to the woods and leaving her there. So she used the little strength she had left and tried to run. But she collapsed before she reached the door. They caught her, beat her again, and locked her back in the basement. On October 6, 1965, Sylvia's body finally gave up. She lay on the cold floor, barely breathing, unable to move. And then, she was gone. Gertrude, unbelievably, tried to pretend she had been helping Sylvia. She wrote fake notes. She forced the kids to lie. But as the police were leaving, little Jenny, terrified, shaking, looked up at them and whispered, "Get me out of here, and I'll tell you everything." And she did. When doctors examined Sylvia's body, they counted more than 100 injuries: burns, bruises, cuts, signs of starvation, dehydration, shock. The entire country was horrified. The trial became one of the most infamous cases in Indiana's history. Gertrude was sentenced to life, but was later released. She denied her guilt until the day she died. Some of the kids involved got light sentences. Some changed their names and disappeared. Today, in Indianapolis, there's a small memorial bench dedicated to Sylvia Likens. It says, "Sylvia, you didn't do anything wrong." And that's the truth. She didn't. She was a child. A kind, gentle child who ended up in a house full of pain, surrounded by people who never stopped the nightmare when they had the chance. This story isn't just about one cruel woman. It's about what happens when people look away, when they hear screams and close the window, when they see bruises and say nothing, when they know something is wrong and convince themselves it's not their problem. Sylvia Likens wasn't just a victim of Gertrude Banisewski. She was a victim of silence, of indifference, of all the people who could have stepped in, but didn't. And if this story teaches us anything, it's that we can't afford to look away. Not ever. If someone is suffering, if something feels wrong, you speak up, you act, you protect. Because sometimes the difference between life and death is the one person who refuses to stay silent.